right, good evening, everybody. I'll call this meeting of the Olentangy School Board to order. Mr. Jenkins, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Lester?
Here.
Dr. Dabrico?
Here.
Dr. Wallach?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Ms. Schreiber?
Here.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Don't believe we have any amendments to the agenda. Hearing none. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Jenkins?
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
All right, for the President's Report, it's been a very exciting couple of weeks between opening Peachblow Crossing Elementary, which was really just a tremendous event, lots of excitement in the community. I know Principal Grajak was so excited to have that open up and get started. I know it's just the pictures have been great over the past couple of days. And then we had the convocation, which was really a wonderful event. You can feel the energy in the room there of everybody just so excited to get back and into the spirit of school. So I really appreciate Krista and Todd and everybody for all the work putting on that event. The speaker, Kay Francis, was great and just really had a very positive message. And I love the theme this year of finding your purpose, right? That applies to both our students and our staff and really the community. I mean, it's a very important message. So love that idea. We have a pretty light agenda tonight. I will note that there is one item for which I have a conflict that I'm going to step out of the room when that happens so that we just avoid any potential conflicts. And Dr. Dabrico will take over in calling the roll for that. Otherwise, in terms of committee updates, Dr. Wallach and I had the Mental Health Committee last night. We're talking about some potential options for some student-led competitions, conversations around how to attack stigmas in schools and trying to game that out with some of our community members. It was one of the ideas that came to us from one of the community members. We're continuing to work on that. And also really hearing about, I'm not going to steal Dr. Barrett's thunder on all of the things that will be coming here that she'll be giving us an update on, but really a lot of great stuff happening around mental health.
I think that covers it.
Very good. Any other committee meetings since our last meeting?
No, facilities in September, early September, so nothing to report.
Good. All right. Well, then we will jump right into it. We have our professional development plan update with Mr. DiTilio and Ms. Furry.
Good evening. It's good to see all of you. Thanks again for the opportunity tonight to do an update on our professional learning plan. I'm joined by Jen Fury, our Assistant Director of Instructional Technology. For the last 2 or 3 years, instructional technology and curriculum have kind of partnered on professional learning just as a way to kind of integrate our work. So Jen's here with me today. Tonight's presentation has 2 components, and one of them is one we haven't really talked about before, so we'll get to that in a minute. But there's kind of the teacher side of professional learning we're going to talk about, but also tonight we're going to share with you the work we've been doing with administrators in terms of our leadership development program. And, as a district, I think that this is something that really does set us apart from districts I've worked in the past when we go and talk to other folks, is that we really do believe in the importance of adult learning just as much as we focus on that student learning. And what you'll see tonight is how the 2 components of the teacher track we have, but also the administrator track, kind of play off each other. And we feel that's really important that these 2 are in line so that we really create a culture of learning that really permeates all parts of the organization, that everyone knows it's our responsibility to grow and learn our profession as we continue to move on so that we can meet the needs of students. So we're really proud of this work. If you've heard me talk about it before, it's definitely where my passion is for this organization, and I'm glad that we get a chance to share it with you. So I'm going to pass it over to Jen here, and she's going to kind of walk us through the first couple parts.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come and speak tonight about the professional learning plan and focus for the year. As Vince had shared, I have been a part of the professional learning planning for the last couple of years, and I'm excited to share a little bit about what we did last year as well as what we're going to do this year, and how that kind of leads into what Mr. D'Attilio is going to talk about here in a little bit. So we have 3 district PD days. Those happen in September, December, and then February. And those days are all centered around the professional learning focus that we've developed for the year. In between each of those three PD days, we have our 3 curriculum building visits. And these building visits are really special in that everyone on the academic team teams up and we go out into the buildings and we provide a strategy or a tool or a resource in 15 minutes or less for the teachers. So it's a collaborative effort between all the departments in the academic team as well as equity and inclusion team. And we come together, we create this building visit, we visit every single building in the district and present them with this routine or strategy that they can then take back in their classroom and implement immediately, and it aligns with the professional learning focus. And I think as you hear us talk tonight, you're going to see and hear how everything we do around professional learning has that interwoven theme throughout the year. We bookend each of our professional learning kind of events with our think tank and our Elevate. We just had Elevate a couple of weeks ago, and those are really our kickoff and our closure events for the professional learning focus. With think tank, we're kind of celebrating the successes and the things that teachers have focused on throughout the year, things that they get excited about, that they've put their time and their effort, a lot of seeds of change projects that you've all kind of taken a part of and come to throughout the year. That happens at Think Tank. Elevate is where we really kick off the professional learning focus for the year. And what was very exciting is that this past Elevate and Think Tank, we had some of our highest attendance that we've had in previous years. We also have our Olentangy Professional Learning Academy, Professional Development Academy, our OPDA courses. Those run throughout the year. We have administrators that teach those courses as well as teachers, and those are focused on various topics that both teachers and we kind of at the district level feel would be beneficial to the teachers. So Seeds of Change is one of those OPDA courses, as well as we've had some AI courses. I know there was one on the book Permission to Feel, as well as some other technology tools that are out there. And then lastly, that building level staff meeting, daily collaboration time is essential to that professional learning that happens throughout the year. So last year, our professional learning focus, we really took a closer look at maximum learning and asked ourselves the question of what does learning look like today? Our mission was established back in 1991, and a lot has changed in terms of learning and should change since 1991. And so we really wanted teachers to ask themselves and really look at their practice and what should learning look like today. And to do that, we wanted them to focus on 2 core documents that help us to facilitate maximum learning for every student. And that was our Portrait of a Learner and our Olentangy Foundations. And so days 1 and 2, they spent time diving into those core documents, looking at their practice as well as their team or their grade level, and how those 2 should and do drive what happens in the classroom in terms of teaching and learning. Day 3 was, I'm slightly a little biased on this one, but day 3 was my favorite day of the year last year. We did something very different last year. For day 3, we brought all of our high schools together in one building. We brought all of our middle schools together in a building, and then we grouped our elementaries into 4s and put them in buildings together. And we ran 6 district conferences for our teachers. And this took a lot of planning, but a lot of collaboration happened to make this day possible. Our building administrators worked alongside with us, the building leadership teams, the PD planning teams, members of the academic team, our technology team was on hand those days. So it was a lot of collaboration, as well as the teachers who came together and were willing to present. And as you can see, we have our feedback up there from the last PD days last year, and it's some of the highest feedback that we've had for the past couple of years, specifically on that PD Day 3. Overwhelmingly, we heard from teachers, this is something that they want to do again, and so we're going to continue to provide them with that experience where they get to come together and they get to collaborate and learn and grow together with their colleagues. So I'm going to let Vince kind of talk a little bit about this year.
Thanks, Jen. And I think that the feedback is an important thing for us to pay attention to, because we're also gathering feedback after each day, so we're adjusting, and that's why I really think you see the feedback getting better and better each year. We kind of have that trend, and our teachers are a tough crowd, and I mean that in the terms that they expect a lot from us. Like, their expectation for professional learning is it's hard to meet sometimes. So it's a challenge, but I think it's one that we really enjoy trying to meet, and I'm really proud of that feedback, and I think our teachers should also, and administrators. So in terms of this year's focus, what we tried to do when we were thinking about how we kind of turn to the next page or the next chapter or the next step in the journey is really think about how can we connect to where we've been so it doesn't feel like it's something new. I mean, that's a complaint sometimes teachers will say, you're always switching your focus, you're always switching. So there's enough, I guess, connection to the past, but also something new and novel that our teachers haven't thought about. We know that that's a strategy for engaging people, is when you present something new and able to wrap your head around it. So this year's focus, and we sometimes call it a focus, sometimes we also explain it as a through line. It's something that kind of goes through everything we do, and we can connect back to it. And this year we decided that we really wanted to focus in on the continued exploration of those two documents that you have in front of you, but zoom in and start to explore how the two documents play off one another. Because one of the main ways I see learning having changed over the course of my career is that we now see how these dispositions of a learner and the teaching practices kind of work together, that you can't just focus on learning content, right? You also have to embed these other skills and dispositions into that work. So you could just teach a lesson on being curious on Friday, right, and say, great, go off to your weekend, but how do you embed curiosity, opportunities for curiosity and play within the learning? So this year in particular, we're looking at purposeful, which thank you for mentioning our focus on purpose, and instruction. So the question really this year is, how do you design instruction in a way that allows students to develop a sense of purpose? And you see up there, you can obviously read the focus for yourself, but we're looking for a way to design instruction that inspires students to figure out what they're passionate about. Think about who they are, who they want to be, and how they want to contribute to the world around them. And then those 3 bullet points below, those are pulled right out of the instruction foundation, that these are some things we're going to be working on this year. How do we leverage student interests and passions, not only for engagement, but to deepen the learning? We have a lot of teachers who are really, really great at this, but also I think we could take that work further. The second bullet point is so important to what we believe about instruction, is that you need to use a variety of models and strategies to meet the diverse needs of learners. I mean, there is so much diversity within a classroom, in terms of what kids know, their experiences. You have to really be equipped with a lot of strategies to be able to meet those needs, and we think that's a path to also students developing their purpose. And then last, one that I just want to call out that I think is something we've talked a lot about recently, is how do we create authentic audiences for our students' work? Because as a teacher and someone who still considers themselves a teacher, it gets old creating work for me, right, in the classroom, and that wears off pretty fast in a middle school. I learned that, right, that I can't be the only audience. So we're really trying to think about ways that we can inspire our teachers to bring that relevance, bring that authenticity into the classroom, so kids really start to get a sense of who they are and how and why the learning matters. So in terms of, let me go back one step here. One other thing I wanted to mention is just that with the focus as a through line, I think it allows us to connect lots of things that we do back to purpose. So sometimes, we start as a professional learning focus, but we find out there's other avenues, there's other initiatives that we can connect back to that. And I really think that is something that influences our culture here, is when our staff and our leaders feel like everything is connected. I think they feel like they're all kind of facing in the same direction. And I think that's a really good thing for our culture and sort of how we kind of move forward. And this is just another point we haven't shared in the past, but I think it's an important thing to understand about professional learning is that although we create the focus, we are not writing scripts for administrators to follow on these PD days and BLTs. What we're doing is we're creating a frame, and then we're asking them to kind of draw the picture in the center. And these goals are sample goals from some of our building CIPs. And this year, we really have a focus about making your PD in your building feel like Freedom Trail PD. It should feel like Shanahan PD for your teachers. It can be connected to the focus, but it shouldn't look the same in every building because our buildings have different needs, right? And different gaps in their understanding and different things they're working on. So, anything from our elementaries working on Bridges math adoption, how do we connect that back to both being purposeful and as an instructor, but also students developing that sense of purpose? Our work around our MTSS framework and process, there's a lot of buildings focused in on that. How does that tie to developing a sense of purpose in learners and using those variety of instructional methods? And then at our high school, we've been doing a lot of work around student agency to really motivate students and get them prepared for that world beyond school. Again, how does that tie back to that idea of purpose? So really what we're challenging buildings with is, we'll give you the kind of high level through line and some of the materials, but then we help them in their BLTs craft that unique story in their building that happens on those days. And again, I think this is something that's special about the culture of learning that we have is that, it's similar and consistent enough, but also has that ability for buildings and teachers to explore their own interests and passions. And I think having that balance is what's really important because if you go too far one way or the other, I think there's negative impacts of that. So that's the first part around professional learning, and we'll do questions at the end, but I want to jump right in, if that's okay, to the leadership development, because it's closely connected to what we've been doing with teacher learning. And before I start this section, I do really want to say thank you, not because it's Randy's night tonight, right? But I really want to say thank you to Randy and Krista because, honestly, and say thank you to them because, one, they allowed me to be part of this process, and two, they've mentored me through this process. They don't know that, but part of me working with them on this and kind of taking more of a leadership role in leadership development has helped me grow a lot. So it's been really fun getting to do this, and it's something that I never would have thought I'd be up here talking about leadership development. So I'm very excited about it. So our district strategic goal to foster leadership development, this program that we've developed is really our effort to meet that strategic objective. And I hope to lay out a few things today that will help you kind of understand how we do that. So a couple ideas around how we design this. Number one is we feel that it is important that we as leaders have a collective purpose, right? We have a mission that we all get around, but we really have to have this idea of a collective purpose and why. And we know that when a group of leaders has that, and like I said, they're all facing in the same direction, you feel that tie to the culture. You feel that sense of belonging. You feel like you're on the same team, which that camaraderie is really important when you're doing this work of a building leader or a district leader. The second bullet point is that we realize that this is not going to happen by chance. Leaders are not going to get better just by letting them kind of go out into the building. You have to set aside time to do this work. And if you think it's important, you have to make time and get people in the seats. And I think that we've made that message pretty clear over the last few years that this work is important to us and we need to make it valuable for our leaders. And it's something that people show up to and they're excited to be there. And then third, I mentioned that idea of sense of belonging and camaraderie. And I felt this when we first started this program as a participant, that there's something really assuring about sitting next to people who maybe you don't know, maybe they work in a different area, but they're struggling with some of those same things. And what I've noticed is in our administrators is that this pushes back against some of the stresses of the job. And I think it really pushes back against burnout too, because I watch people come into that meeting, these spaces totally frazzled, but then let their guard down, connect with somebody around a challenge and really, really grow from there. So those are three things that I really think are important to sort of how we go about doing this. So our timeline, just like for PD, there's also kind of a timeline and process for our leadership development. And we have 3 whole group touch-base meetings. These are called our all administrator meetings. The first one's our kickoff. We have one in December and in May. And those are sort of our whole group opportunities to like take the temperature of how administrators are doing in the district, what's going on with them, also reconnect them to the focus of our work, think about what progress we've made since the last time we've talked. And then in between there, we have 4 Legion meetings. And Mr. Wright was the sort of the impetus of the Legion, and it really started sitting around a conference table. But as we've grown, it's grown to these big events that we put on throughout the year. And I'll talk a little bit more about Legions in a minute, but that's kind of the cadence that we work with. Similar to the teacher schedule, it's kind of similar and parallels that. So the 2 foundational components that really were the beginning of our leadership development program have now become sort of where we build everything off of. So number 1, like I said, is the Legion meeting. Dedicated time to grow as leaders. Dedicated time to get to know other people in the organization. The first year that I sat at a Legion table, my partner was Darren Meeker, the athletic director at Liberty High School. I would have never probably talked to this person, but got to know him with a lot of similarities between what we do, and the challenges we face. I got to learn about the challenges of being an athletic director and how that plays into the role in a high school. The other thing is to think critically and reflect on current leadership practices and future goals. A lot of what we did in those meetings was storytelling or scenario-based work, where we're sitting down and thinking through something together and saying, Darren, how would you handle this in your role? Here's how I would handle it. Do you have any advice for me? So those Legions are, though it was the beginning, it's also the backbone of what we do, that people look forward to those. The second piece is DISC profiles, and if you're familiar with DISC, it's sort of a leadership inventory. There's a lot of different ones out there, but this is the one we've settled on and we've used, and it really has become part of our culture. Like even folks who, maybe even myself a little bit, were like, this isn't accurate of me. Like I've watched my DISC change over the time in the organization, and I know why, because we've thought about it and reflected on it. And we've also done a really great job of communicating to people that all 4 of those styles in there are all important in different situations, and the skill is learning to know when to flex them and get into a different style, right? And for me personally, as someone who was growing into a leadership role, that benefited me immensely. And although we don't talk a lot about DISC per se now, it's the foundation of kind of every conversation we have. So moving into the modern, kind of the most relevant version of our leadership development program, I gave all of you a handout of our leadership framework. And one is I'm super proud of this work, not because I facilitated it with leaders, but because they built it, right? I didn't make it. These are all the administrators' ideas. I just helped kind of facilitate the process. And really what we came to realize over the last 2 years is that we were trying to take the portrait of a learner and make it actionable for a leader. And it was fine, but it was too much, it just didn't fit exactly. It didn't feel natural. So we started to ask the question, like, how do we operationalize the portrait of a learner for a leader? And really, how do we create a tool that helps leaders get better even when they're not with us in these meetings? What is something they can go back to? Again, the whole idea of pointing everyone in the same direction. How do we get really clear about where we're headed and the skills it's going to take to get there? So I'll talk a little bit more about how we created it, but what you see on the right there and what you see in front of you is our first iteration of this leadership framework, which I hope to grow over time. There are 4 core competencies that our leaders identified as priorities under one under each of the dispositions from Portrait of a Learner. So when we looked at purposeful, our leaders came up with a long list of skills and competencies that align to being purposeful. They decided that right now in Olentangy, in the current situation, that being goal-oriented was something that everyone wanted to work on. So from there, we also started to talk about what would that look like. If you had me come out to your building and I was going to see you being goal-oriented, what were the behaviors that I was going to look for? What were the behaviors you could ask yourself? How am I exhibiting these things? And then as you go down the page, the continuum of growth, the group and myself, and I think the folks who kind of are at the helm of planning these meetings, we wanted to make sure that this document was not a low bar, right? We didn't want to just write something up that everybody does. So this idea of having a continuum of growth, we tried to write developing so that we would all be there. Like, we wanted to write it as something aspirational, that like an advanced goal-oriented person, I don't know if I know that person yet in the organization. So it should sound lofty. It's for a reason. It's because we want to make sure people see that, you know, it's not just okay to check the box and say, yeah, I'm goal-oriented, or I do that all the time. And then at the bottom, the other related competencies. In the future, we're going to build out those skills and start to think more about practical kind of applications around those. So there's one of those for each of the competencies, just so you understand how the framework sort of works. And I hope you see how those things are more actionable and real world for a leader, that they could actually look at on a day-to-day basis and go, oh yeah, that's me struggling with this, and I need to do a little bit better. So the outcomes that we've experienced from the framework, one is I feel like we have a very clear expectation for our leaders. And it's not, like I said, a low bar. This ensures that our actions match the goals and values of the organization, which, you know, we can have all the goals and values and mission and vision that we want, but if we go out in a building or we're out in the wild and we're seeing something different, that doesn't matter, right? We need to be able to see these agreed upon behaviors. Number two is that it helps prepare future leaders. And, you know, Mr. Wright did a great job of saying that this year, that, you know, we're creating this for the future of Olentangy. And I think that really spoke to the people in the room, that this is like a gift we're giving to that next generation. And it could be the next person that takes your role, or it could be a teacher that moves into one of these roles. So we have to, having those clear expectations and things to work on prepares people for the next step in their career. It was designed by our leaders. I'm super proud of this. Like, I challenged them to say, like, we could stand up here and make this for you. We could pay someone, a consultant, to come in and do this, but you need to contribute. We actually designed it like a project-based learning experience, like we would with teachers. We designed it the same exact way. So they would do some work, we would go back, we'd polish it up, we'd get feedback. And then lastly, I think it meets the goal of being a tool. Like, I want them to be able to, like, pull this out, right, and actually have it meaningful to what they're doing and what they're working on. And it allows them to monitor their progress, too, which I think is a huge missing component. Is we set a lot of goals, right? We have goals, but when are we sitting down and going, how am I doing? What do I need to do differently? And it's really allowing us to sort of track that progress. And then just a couple notes on next steps as we move into this year, because obviously the framework is in place, they built it, we rolled it out to our new administrators at our admin kickoff. Number one, we need to measure our growth around these competencies. So every administrator at the First Legion will be taking a self-assessment that we've developed around those competencies. And then 2 more times, so 3 times throughout the year, they're gonna have 3 data points to see how their growth is, or lack of growth maybe in some areas, is looking. And for us as a planning team, we're gonna be looking at that data overall and saying, where do we need to focus our efforts as a leadership development program? Maybe it is, you know, being goal-oriented, or maybe it's in another aspect. But it also allows people to see a better image of themselves as a leader. I think if you paired that with your DISC profile and your competency look, that would be a really interesting sort of vision of where I'm at. Our administrative mentorship program, shout out to Monica and Tron, who kind of are taking this a step further, which developing a new or newer for newer administrators, a mentorship program, because there is a more detailed version of leadership development, a more personalized, personal version that's also necessary, because not everyone is willing to speak up in a meeting of 30 peers, right? So that's going to be a really powerful piece. And I know we're already kicking that off with some of our new folks. Another spin-off of these meetings that is connected and happening this year again, thanks again to Trond and Monica, Principal Learning Labs. These are principal-specific sort of Legion meetings, right, that happen after our principal meetings. These address really specific pieces of being a principal. Some of it's curricular, some of it's HR, some of it's communications. But in the future, we'd like to see learning labs for more specific kind of groups of people in the organization. And then lastly, and this is the one that I'm really pumped about getting off the ground this year, is a version of this for teachers, to really create a pipeline within our teachers to develop their leadership skills, not just to be an administrator, but to be a great teacher leader, a great BLT member, just a great fourth grade teacher who leads their fourth grade team. But then eventually also, I'd like to see some of those people be the people we recruit into becoming an administrator in the district. Now, that was a lot. Sorry, a lot to say about this. But I think what I'll end with is saying I hope you see the parallel between the teacher learning and how we're creating kind of a mimicking that with administrators, and that alignment that we're creating, I really feel like that is driving the culture of learning that we're trying to really promote and maintain here, because that's why we're so successful. So Jen and I are both here. Sorry for making you stand there, Jen. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Libby's like,
I mean, I'm geeking out a
Yeah,
little
I'll
bit
let
over
you
here.
go
This is my world, right? I work in this field, and so I am sitting here like beaming with pride that this was done internally. I think that you should all be insanely proud of yourselves. This is really, I think, I mean, I want to dive into this deeper, really exploring this, but this is really solid work. So thank you to everyone involved in this. And then I have to say too, you would talk about belonging and what we're cultivating in our leaders, our building leaders in particular. I'm thinking about principals and APs. And it's funny, earlier today I was actually diving into data that was a couple years old, but looking at principal attrition rates across the country. And it was like 11%. 11% who leave the field, not leave to go teach or to be a administrator in another district, or to go from principal to superintendent or to central office, but people who straight leave the profession. And, I'm just trying to think, I'm sure we have that data somewhere, but as we do exit interviews, I mean, I know we lost one of our administrators who went on to be superintendent elsewhere this academic year. We have those that retire. But when we're looking at our, exit interviews, do we have principals and APs who are like, peace out on education? Because I don't know if we have a rough estimate on how many people, or if we're really cultivating an environment. I mean, clearly we have received accolades for being such a great place to work, and I think that a lot of the mission of what you're setting out to do with this leadership framework and development, investing in our leaders, it really keeps people here.
Yeah. And I would say, just anecdotal, and Nancy, you can jump in. Administratively, we don't have administrators leaving education. They're leaving the district for other aspirational positions in education. And administratively, for us, really one of our challenges is pay, and how low we are in some of our positions. And we have administrators who leave for higher pay. That's one of our biggest challenges here.
And similar positions in other districts, so same position for pay. So we're in the process of doing a rather robust, comprehensive admin compensation study to be able to speak to that and come up with some strategies and a philosophy around what we value. But it's very much aligned with this as well. So pay is one small part. The value that they feel with this type of support speaks volumes, and it's paramount.
And I do have one question too, actually, beyond that, which you talked about the self-assessment that would be corresponding to this. Just any more insight on how that was developed, or and I don't need to see a completed one, but I would love to see what that self-assessment.
Yeah, I could definitely share
looks
that
like.
with you. I mean, it was internally created through sort of the research process that led us there to some of those ideas to see like what those like the indicators, are of those behaviors. And then it's because it's self-reported, right? And that's part of the reason I want it for them. Like I want each person to have that profile at the end of the year and go, okay, what do I want to work on moving forward? I do think there's probably some room to formalize like the bigger picture of the data, like how do we visualize as a district, what are we good at in terms of leadership, where are we really competent, and where do we need to grow. I would say those 4 areas, those 4 skills ended up on there because people were like, yeah, that's hard for me. You know what I mean? And I think that's also a great part of it. I can definitely share the self-assessment with you though.
Kudos.
Yeah.
I had, as someone who is not entrenched in that sort of thing day to day, I'm going to
maybe step back a little bit to some stuff from the beginning of your presentation. It sounds like you did a really great job explaining how the leadership training comes back and how you follow up on those things. Can you talk a little bit about how the instructor, the teacher training on those 3 days, like what is the follow through on that and who's responsible? Is it like building level? Just because I know I've seen, just in my work and stuff like that, people go to a training and they're all excited, and then like 2 weeks later you've lost like 80% of what you learned or something like that. So, it sounds like the teachers are really excited about this, but what are we doing to follow through and make sure that this is not just something that they're real excited about on PD day, but something that's implemented for long term?
Yeah, so we meet, leading up to those PD days, we have meetings with our PD planning teams. So we just wrapped up 2 weeks ago with our summer BLT meetings. So we met with every BLT across the district in our summer BLT meetings throughout the week and kind of introduced the focus, shared a lot about what Vince was talking about today, about purposeful and instruction and how that's going to kind of connect to last year's focus. And then we have more meetings next week. So we'll have our virtual PD planning meetings next week where we'll help support those buildings in creating and finalizing that PD that they're going to deliver. And then we really kind of make sure when we go in to do those building visits that we're connecting the previous learning from those PD days 1 and 2 with those building visits. And so we'll pull out the focuses from those first couple of PD days when we go in for our building visits to work with the teachers and kind of have conversations with them. And then we do the BLT meetings where the staff are coming together, the teachers are coming together as well. And I'll let Vince add a little bit more.
The other thing is just that after each one, we get the feedback, and then each building gets a feedback report from their building. And then usually we spend the beginning of the first PD meeting going, okay, like let's pick a couple things out you want to address, like low-hanging fruit, like what did your staff say? Let's address that right up front with staff and say, hey, we heard you, we're going to adjust. And I think that's what people want to hear with feedback.
I think that's a big thing. I spent a lot of time over the last year diving into every bit of the feedback from each of the PD days to really listen to what it was that our teachers are liking and what they're not liking, and how, we still want to bring in some of those components that maybe they don't always love, but we feel are necessary, that grounding on that first day. But how can we make it a better experience for our teachers? They don't love that kind of grounding that we feel is so important in setting the stage for the learning for the year, but how can we build upon it and make it a better experience for our teachers so they are more excited about PD for the year?
And the one other thing I would mention about how you follow up, like it's so important that our administrators who are out doing walkthroughs, out doing evaluations, like point it out when somebody's, like they need to know enough to be able to point out when someone is trying something that they've learned on a PD day or they saw at a building visit. We have some people who really buy into that and really call it out and celebrate those things. It's just, and it's like reminding them of the story we're trying to tell. They got to like come back to that through line, and we have some different ways we can do that with them.
So if you think about things that impact learning in a positive way, if you're old like me, you think, well, you got to be doing homework, got to be a great classroom manager, technology. All of those, according to John Hattie, have less of an effect on student learning than does what you're doing with professional learning. And a lot of times that gets overlooked. It's because the state mandates so much stuff and we're always doing, it can never be a compliance thing. And you've proven that because our students achieve at super high levels. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Second thing is keeping it in-house is super important because most of our teachers, most of our staff live in the district. They know what our parents expect, and it's a high level of expectation, rightly so, for achievement. So that's a big deal, keeping it in-house. If we're serious about alleviating barriers to learning, all those things from our strategic plan, we'll continue to emphasize what you're doing. So thank you for your hard work.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And what I'll add is, first of all, for all the 3 people that are watching, you can always see your backs when you're talking, right? but your eyes are lit up, right? Right, yeah, right. The passion on this is evident, right? And that carries through. It's not, the complaint I have about, education at all levels, about work in higher education, is it gets real jargony and it feels just too surface level, right? That's not what this is, right? This is intentional to like the 1000th degree, right? And that only comes when you care really deeply. It's very, very clear that you care really deeply about this, and that you're trying to connect it in a way that makes sense. And I appreciate that you're saying that, you know, both the teachers align and the administrators align, but what I really appreciate is that it's aligned to what we're telling our students too, right?
100%.
And that, it not only creates this synergy across the organization, which, sorry, I'm using buzzwords again, right? But it also allows them to relate to students and show them what this is like in their lives, right? I mean, that's where the personal resilience, curious, and when I look at those things, I say that's what makes someone successful in the real world. Those are the types of skills that differentiate, not, you know, someone who's smart or whatever, or this or that. I mean, these are the skills of great employees. These are the skills of great community members and what makes them special. And so you're anchoring to that, and you're not just doing it of, all right, we're going to be purposeful today, great, see you later, right? We don't all hit the purposeful sign on our way in the door. It's that we're really thinking about what that means. So I think just that level of thought and care, you know, it goes into making a really strong organization. It's no surprise to me why we get the best organization for workers over and over. And you know, we were talking with Superintendent Meyer and Mr. Jenkins as well about developing pipelines, right? And how we develop the next phase of leaders at all levels of the organization. Obviously, we have challenges of pay and other things like that, and we have to. That's part of our job to think about some of that. But the types of people that we want to be here, you're making them, right? You're helping to foster that growth. So, I mean, just truly thank you. It's amazing work.
Thank you. If I can add one last comment. I've only been here for, I'm going on my 6th year now. And when I came into Olentangy and I first started experiencing PD in the district, my first thought was, we do PD different here in Olentangy. And that's something to celebrate. And I think that's what gets both Vince and I very excited about the professional learning that happens here in Olentangy. And, you know, when we've brought new people into the district, you hear that same message. We just do PD differently here. And that's one of the many things that makes Olentangy such a special place and what gets us really excited.
By the way, I don't think you were biased on that day 3 thing. I would say the data supports that everyone felt that way.
It was so fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right.
We got to make it better this year.
Yeah,
That's
we
the
do.
problem. But
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, Dr. Behrens, student well-being. I'm not talking with you. I'm sorry, I'll be right back.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm here to give you the student well-being update. So I thought we'd start looking at last year. You know, we have such great programming, we're building our staffing, but the question has been asked, well, we have all these supports, how do we know it's working? How do we know we're actually helping students? Obviously, we can see our students are learning well, but how do we know that their mental health is being taken care of, that they are being supported in a variety of ways? So I have some data to share with you. So from the 23-24 school year, we were able to collect some data through our Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services certification. We have to collect more data than we used to, which is a great thing. Actually, I love data. I'll be sending it to Jeanette for some more analysis and things. But we have our note-taking system now, so we're able to see how many students, almost to the T, I didn't put the total number up here, that we're actually serving through our school social workers. And so last year we had over 900 students who were served at the Tier 2 or Tier 3 level through our school social workers. And then at the high school level, we took just a 6-week snapshot of students who were seeing either our school social worker or our OSU clinician. And over those 6 weeks, through the 4 high schools, except for the Liberty High School OSU clinician, I can't remember, she might have been on maternity leave or something. There was a reason why we had to exclude that data. Anyway, there was 628 sessions just over that 6-week period. And some of the topics that were mainly covered during those sessions, there's going to be overlap, so it's not going to add up to 100. But anxiety and nervousness was our highest with 51.9%. Academic stress, depression, peer relationships, self-esteem, trauma, and then suicidal thoughts or behaviors. So we had 11.3% of those 628 sessions that were specific to a student in crisis or suicidal thoughts, So it's a big deal, right? We have those mental health people in place so that those students can go and talk to them and get the support that they need.
So, if we just pause for a minute.
Yes.
So, trying to put it in context, so 900 students out of 23,000, so about 4%.
That was just Tier 2 and Tier 3 services.
Can you explain what those are? Sorry.
Yes, it's in my future slide, but yes, I will. So Tier 1 is our universal services that all students get. So that's going to be through our school counselors mainly, but any type of prevention education, things like that. So services that are available to all of our students. The Tier 2 services are going to be about 5 to 10% of students are receiving Tier 2 services, so it's a selective group of students who need more intensive supports, small groups, things like that. And then Tier 3 is going to be 1 to 5% of students who are getting usually one-on-one counseling with a social worker or mental health specialist.
So that 4% probably isn't spread evenly across elementary, middle, and high.
No.
So how does it vary by kind of K through 5, middle school and high school?
Yeah, so I would say our middle schools and high schools have more services being provided to them just because actually, now that I think about it, the data's going to be skewed a little bit because a lot more elementary kids are going to be seen because they're usually seen for a shorter period of time. If you ever try to do a therapy session with a second grader, you're not going to get them to sit for very long. So usually those sessions are going to be 20 to 25 minutes long. So I'm going to be able to see more kids throughout a day at an elementary. So it's going to look like there's more kids being served potentially at the elementary level. Whereas our middle school and high school, those are going to be more traditional looking sessions where they're 30 plus 45, 50-minute sessions. But in general, typically our secondary students are getting more of the services because we are trying to do more of the prevention education at the elementary level. So they're getting a lot more Tier 1 services with the prevention education.
And just to be clear, that 900 plus students is just the school social workers.
That's just school social workers,
So
yes.
not even including the mental health professionals or the other clinicians or other things.
Correct. So last year we had the Centero clinicians, although we only had 2 or 3, so we didn't have very many. So I don't have their data as to how many students they were serving at a Tier 3 level. So this was just the school social workers that we have. Yes.
It's like a simile is, how should we think about the 900? Is that a lot? Is that not a lot? Is it increasing, decreasing? I mean, what's the trend?
I would say every year we're increasing. Every time we've been able to expand our staffing. Somehow we always get by with however many. When we had 3 social workers when I started, we got by, but then we added another one and there were more students to serve, and then we added another one and there were more students to serve. So I would say if I were to look at the 2021 data, 22 data, it is steadily increasing. I think that, again, we're trying to make sure that we're beefing up our prevention education as well. And so if we have more prevention in place, then hopefully we're going to need less intervention as well. So I would say it's about on par, if not a little bit higher than where we were 22, 23.
How many social workers do we have in 23, 24?
23, 24, we had 18. Yes.
So just to follow up on this line of thought, it's hard to decide, is this an unmet need that we need a lot more people, or since they're here, or more people showing up? But I will tell you, just in my experience, kids don't usually seek this out because there's nothing else to do in their day.
Mm-hmm.
They typically seek it out because there's a need.
Right.
So if we're finding that when there's more services available, more kids are using it, I tend to think there's an unmet need.
And if you think we have one school social worker at the high school, so we have one school social worker who is serving, 1,800 kids. So he can only see so many, say Dan Murphy at Orange High School can only see so many kids in a school week. So his number is going to be limited. I mean, they take as many kids as they certainly can. We always say we don't have a wait list. Like for our internal people, we say we don't have a wait list. We'll figure out how to serve the kids, but yeah.
So the point for the percentages in my mind is, you're not making a claim that this is a representative sample, because it's not, because it's only representative if you take that as an entire population, not looking at the entire 24,000. You're saying
Correct.
Of that population.
Yes, correct.
So that's how
Of
we
the
need to look at it.
628 sessions of those students, that's what those students were
Right,
coming
as a
to
population
see.
unto itself.
Correct.
So of the kids that are,
Yep.
gotcha.
And to keep handing out
No,
this,
it's fine.
but those 628 sessions then would be considered Tier 3 services if they're one-on-ones? Is that what you're?
Yes,
Okay.
most likely.
But-
There's probably a bit of tier 2, so if they're seeing the social worker for more self-esteem, self-concept, maybe some academic stress, that might fall more under the tier 2 umbrella. When it gets into depression, anxiety, trauma, suicidal ideation, that's most likely going to be under the tier 3 umbrella.
But that first bullet point is just the school social workers, and the second one includes
The OSU
clinicians
clinicians.
and other mental health professionals in the schools.
So that would be the 4 school social workers at the high school, and then 3 of the OSU clinicians
Okay.
across 3 high schools. The 4th one wasn't able to give the data.
Just so we're, sorry, well, just so we're thinking about this correctly too, like, I mean, it's tough to sort of do all this apples to apples because we've got different things here. The first one is just social workers, and they saw 900 plus students. The second one is 628 sessions, so you may be
Right.
seeing one student multiple times.
Correct.
And of course, that's the social workers and the clinicians just over 6 weeks. So excluding one of the clinicians. So really what we're seeing is a large number of sessions here, really over a pretty brief period of time. We don't know how many students this is, but that's quite a bit.
Yeah, I had a table that had a breakdown of, how many sessions, one session through 16 sessions, and I think there was only, in that 6-week period, only like 2 kids had seen somebody 16 times, which would be a very frequent flyer. But, so I think the main, if I'm trying to remember my table correctly, about 1 to 6 sessions was the highest percentage, because again, usually the kids are seeing the clinicians once a week. Kind of typical of an outpatient type of.
I don't want to keep you up on one slide, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of.
Just, Mr. Lester, one more clarification, because there's a myth out there, and I have people maybe, I don't know how often, but they'll come up and say, well, how does this work with mental health services? The really crucial to helping kids is the whole family, right? I mean, the kids don't come to us and we're like, all right, well, we're not telling your people about this. Parents are integral with this whole process, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, parents can call us and say, my child's struggling with this, or.
And they do.
Right, it's not, but parents, students, teachers, counselors do work in the classrooms too? Do they do lessons?
Sometimes the social workers will get pulled in every once in a while to help with things, and I'll talk in a future slide about some things that we are doing this year as well. But typically, a lot of the classroom stuff is going to be the school counselor, and then we just pull in the tier 2, tier 3 people for just specialized things if needed.
So we're all working together to help
Yeah.
the student get rid of the barriers to learning.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Anything else for everyone? Okay. So that's just some statistical data. So now we have some outcome measures. So again, through our OMOS certification, we are required to collect outcome measures. And so one of the outcomes that we decided to collect for this year, and we're continuing to evaluate other outcomes that we could continue to collect, was a satisfaction survey. And so we sent this satisfaction survey to parents of students who received services through our school social workers, and then we sent it to students at the middle school and high school level. We didn't think that elementary kids would really understand a satisfaction survey for that, but we did still send it to their parents. And so we sent all of those at the end of the school year, and we didn't get, this was the first time we've been doing this to get this outcome data for OMOS, but so we didn't get a huge response, but we did get 81 parent responses and 66 student responses.
That does feel low.
It is.
And so what does that say?
That we can do a better job communicating that will be coming out soon. It was one of those things where we did our site survey and figured out what our outcome measures were going to be, and I think we just didn't do a very good job of communicating with our parents that would be coming out to, again, our social workers have never sent a satisfaction survey about the services that we provided, so I don't think it was necessarily something that they were looking for. And it was the end of the school year, and so I'm sure parents were a bit more overwhelmed. So I think we might try to put it maybe closer, not so close to the end of the school year next year. So some of the parent outcomes, they were all pretty positive. 93.9% 93.7% agreed or strongly agreed that they were satisfied with the services that their student received. 96.2% agreed or strongly agreed that they felt their student had someone to talk to when they were in trouble. 85% agreed or strongly agreed their student was better at handling daily life since receiving services. And 84.8% agreed or strongly agreed their student was better able to cope since receiving services. And then we did have a section where they could add a free response if they wanted. So here are just a couple quotes from the parents. Mr. Murph has been an amazing resource for my son since elementary school. My son has gone to him for various issues. This was when Mr. Murph was spread across several buildings before he was just in the high school. Let's see, he kept me in the loop when necessary to assure me that my son was on track for everything and is responding in healthy ways to any challenges. I am grateful for the support and direction he has provided my son. Miss Regal, who is at Olentangy High School, has been a godsend, a key support, and one of the reasons our child survived this year despite depression and suicidal ideation. I cannot praise her highly enough. And then the last one, our school social worker may have saved my kid's life. She is vital. So I pulled kind of some big ones that I thought were like parents to put that in a survey that they feel their children were getting services that really, really helped them. And then the student outcomes, again, this was just for middle school and high school, were again, as they were positive, maybe not quite as positive as the parents, but I think sometimes we're harder on ourselves than others are on us. But 93.8% agreed or strongly agreed that they were satisfied with the services. 84.6% agreed or strongly agreed that they felt like they had someone to talk to. 67.2% agreed or strongly agreed they were better at handling daily life. And 70.3% agreed or strongly agreed they were better able to cope since receiving services. The survey is much longer than this. I just wanted to pull out a few key and then do the similar ones for students and parents. But again, the quotes from the students, I have the best school social worker in the entire world. She is amazing and was always there to support me no matter what. She goes out of her way to help students and goes beyond what she has asked. I couldn't have asked for anyone better. I am so grateful for these services. The staff is great and helped me immensely. Mrs. Owens, who's at Liberty High School, specifically is always there when I need it and would reach out to me. She made me feel recognized, understood, and gave me coping strategies I still use today. I truly believe that everything that was done for me was done with loads of dedication. So again, even our students took the time to give some praise to our amazing staff. So where we are now with our staffing, so here's my tiers that I was telling you about. So we have 52 school counselors, so this is going to be the tier 1 level. We have 1 school counselor per elementary, 2 per middle school. We did add a third one at Olentangy Orange Middle School due to the teacher association ratio. We did get above the ratio number, so they'd added a third counselor there. And then we have 5 per high school, and then we have a school counselor at Oasis and 1 at Olentangy Academy. We also have 29 clinic aides in the buildings who run the school clinic, and then we have 10 SROs. For our tier 2, this year we have 19 school social workers, and that breakdown is 1 per 2 elementary schools, and then we have 1 full-time at the middle school and 1 full-time at the high school. We have 12 school nurses, and so they, different than the clinic aides who run the building clinic, they oversee 2 to 3 buildings, and they do the medical 504s, individualized health plans, and kind of a bit more administrative types of tasks for the nursing services. And 40 school psychologists. And then for tier 3, we have 11.6 mental health specialists. 7 of them are across the elementary and middle school. Those are the in-house clinicians that we hired this year to replace the Centero staff from last year. And then we have the 1 per high school through OSU, and they provide us a 0.6 clinician for overflow and supervision. And then we also have 9 behavior specialists to support at tier 3 as well. So just a few programming highlights. At the beginning of August, we did our TSIP training, which is the Traumatic Event Crisis Intervention Plan training that we do for our administrators, school counselors, social workers, and mental health specialists. This is the training that we do to make sure that if we have an event where something traumatic, subjectively traumatic happens, we make sure that everyone is prepared to respond in the appropriate way. And that's from the smallest trauma. Last year we had a school bus who hit a deer on the way home from school, and those students had to get evacuated from the bus, and emergency services were there. So we had a TSIP response for that to make sure those students were taken care of. 2 large responses last year with the tornado was pretty much a district-wide TSIP response that we had. We updated the district lockdown drill scripts that the teachers use. We wanted to make sure that the language was trauma-informed and age-appropriate for our students, and making sure that we're using language reflective of the standard response protocol rather than ALICE, which is what was used previously. And so we used language from the best practice considerations for armed assailant drills in schools, which is provided by the National Association of School Psychologists, Safe and Sound Schools, and the National Association of School Resource Officers. There have recently been a lot of House bills related to prevention education, one of which was House Bill 123, which requires all students in grades 6 through 12 to receive suicide awareness and prevention education. And so for that, we have always done through our helpline the Signs of Suicide program at grades 7 and 9. And so we had to figure out what we were going to do for 6, 8, 10, 11, and 12. And so the 6th graders are actually going to receive the Sandy Hook Promise Say Something suicide prevention program. And then 8, 10, 11, and 12. Helpline is going to train our in-house social workers and mental health specialists to provide the Signs of Suicide refresher that will serve for that House Bill 123 requirement. There was also a Senate Bill 288 where students in grades K through 5 have to receive sexual abuse prevention education. So our elementary school counselors were able to create a curriculum to help identify trusted adults and identify possible unsafe situations. But they also prepared a parent guide for sexual abuse prevention education to help the parents understand what's being taught to their students under this requirement, and then also how to have those conversations with the kids as well, so that they can also then reinforce the things that they're learning at school through the school counselors. We are partnering again with Ohio State in a different way through the Coach Beyond and Life Sports Initiative. This is for professional learning for our athletic coaches so that they can better support athlete mental health. And so on October 8th, we're hosting a event for our coaches to be able to learn more about that, and then there'll be a spring session as well. And then they're also working on developing a student athlete leadership program where our student athletes will actually go and get trained in specific mental health not necessarily techniques, but ways to support their peers to be able to bring it back to their sports teams.
If I recall, that's a free program.
That is a free program that is being provided, yes.
Is that the one with Dublin, or am I thinking something
Yes,
different?
so we're partnering with Dublin for that. So we're going to host the fall training, and then Dublin's going to host the spring one.
And that's a recent addition, right?
It is, yes.
Great.
Yep. And then we are working on developing curriculum and resources along with facilitating professional learning for our health teachers to make sure that our health curriculums are following all of the appropriate laws and regulations and ODU requirements. Sorry, I'm running out of breath here. We already talked about the Mental Health and Wellness Board Committee, and you guys gave an update about that, so we'll continue that through this year. And then we're continuing to build on our OMAS certification and making sure we're meeting all the requirements for that. And then we were at Convocation. This is a picture of myself and Dr. Branson and Miss Norman with Pickles the preschool penguin. And so we passed out some fidgets and some sensory breathing stickers, which I handed out to you guys earlier, to our staff. But we also highlighted our new employee assistance program and made sure we handed out flyers for that, so our staff are aware of our new employee assistance program, that we can offer them for sessions that they can get for free if they are struggling with things. And then we also had a raffle that had staff give us their favorite staff wellness technique. And so these were a couple that the staff put in there. Breathe in to smell the flowers, breathe out to blow out the candles. You are calm, you are in control, you are strong. You can't pour from an empty cup. Do one thing every day that makes you happy, and make a to-do list at the end of the day so you can leave work at work.
I do want to highlight the employee assistance program.
Absolutely.
Because the work here, I really appreciate. I know Mr. Jenkins, through your office as well, and partnering here. It's not just that there are sessions available, but there's a real level of intentionality that goes along with it, that if you need additional sessions, that they're partnering with your insurer.
Mm-hmm.
So we provide a certain number of free sessions, and then we're able to then bridge that gap, which can be really tough sometimes with insurance and when you're dealing with these external providers, so that we're not just leaving people in the lurch when they need that level of support.
Yeah.
And the thing that we talked about this a little bit at the Mental Health Committee last night. But when you look at things like lockdown drills, these are really stressful events for kids, but they're really stressful events for teachers too, right? And there's a lot of things that are very stressful events for teachers and staff and everybody else too. I mean, not just teachers, but having these sorts of things so that when, as these are weighing on them, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself. Knowing that we have a resource that actually aligns with that is really important. It's one thing to say, well, take care of yourself and figure out how you're going to do it, right? Like, that's not the message we want to send. So I'm glad that we've really updated this program in a way that makes sense there.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure that they know there's 27 crisis support through this as well, so they can call a crisis line. If they don't want to use any of the other crisis lines, they have one. Like you had mentioned, it's really hard to start with a therapist, but then to have to start with a therapist and then move to a different therapist if you need to keep going after those sessions, it can be really difficult to then have to relive and rehash everything that you've already told one person. So I think it's great that they're making sure that is has some really good continuity of care. But then one of the amazing things that I really am trying to push is it's for the staff, but it's also available to their spouse and their dependents up to age 26 as well. And so it's just a benefit to their whole family, because again, if the teacher is struggling or the staff member is struggling, their household might also be struggling as well. And so making sure that everyone's getting that support. And then where are we going? So some things that we're just continuing to do, we're just continuing to keep up with the legislation regarding some social emotional learning and mental health curriculum. We're continuing to review our services provided across the tiers to make sure we're supporting all of those non-academic barriers. Along with the EAP program, we're continuing to look at our staff well-being, what more can we be doing, wanting to put out a staff wellness assessment to find out what do staff need, what would be beneficial for them, to try to get a better idea of how we can better support our staff in that area. And then to top off our OMA certification, there was a law passed, we got in right underneath the umbrella of needing to do it right away, but there is a law now that if you have the OMA certification, you do also have to get the national accreditation now by October 2025. We have just started that process, and so that's through the Commission of Accreditation on Rehabilitation Facilities, CARF, and so that will provide us a national accreditation as well as our state accreditation to continue building our mental health programming. Other questions?
I'll open up to other questions in a second, but I want to comment. I think a lot of the questions that you're asking here about data and sort of the usage and things are really important questions to ask too. And I think it's part of the founding idea of the Wellbeing Committee is to try to get in touch with that. I mean, the challenge with all of this stuff is you can be really well-intentioned of doing things, but you don't know if it's working, or if you don't know that it's working at the level that you want it to, right? And that's where it gets a little scary with mental health is, you can have people go, okay, I get it, but then when it's time to use it, they don't get it, or they don't have what they need. We've heard this especially from the students, and some of the students we had last year on the committee, some of the students we had this year on the committee, is making sure that connection is lining up, making sure that the usage is lining up, and that's going to be a continued struggle. I mean, it's just, I think it's sort of baked into the challenge of mental health, but luckily with the certification, we're able to really get our hands around some of this data a little bit more to ask the right questions to fine tune it. So I know that just hearing this every month as we're going through the committee, I know that you're thinking about it the right way, and it's just going to be a continued challenge where we're trying to get to some of that stuff to make sure we've got that alignment that makes it work the right way. I mean, that's the goal for sure. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're hoping to have, even more and better data, just more data points to be able to pull from for next year. So again, not only are we going to look at satisfaction, but we're going to try to also look at effectiveness. So if we have a student coming to us for depression, we're going to give them the PHQ-9, and then, after so many sessions, we'll give it to them again. Are they improving? Is it actually doing anything? So we're going to have better outcome measures on actual effectiveness as well.
So I guess that's kind of where my head's at, right? So I don't think it's been for lack of investment. Okay, if we look at the staffing slides you provided, I just did the math, it's 182 people on those slides. $15 to $20 million of price, salary, and benefits dedicated to student well-being. And we're struggling to determine, is it effective? And is the demand outpacing the supply or not. And I think we needed to really think about services we provide and how does that compare to similar districts and outcomes.
Although I would note that the staffing there's some aspect of mental health that goes with that, but that includes SROs, right? The SROs
I
are
just
fine.
used the data that was provided on the staffing slides.
But, I mean, we've
It's
got
182
school-
FTE.
We've got school nurses, we've got counselors who do scheduling, we've got SROs. I mean, I think what it speaks to, it's a important point, right? To be sure of, what is our level, but we've got to sort of think apples to apples here of like, what are each of these people doing? Is it their full-time job versus a part of their FTE? And the SROs, it's a part of their FTE, not the full FTE. Or
Okay, so you can take the SROs out,
or the school
you're still
nurses.
142.
Yeah, or the school counselors, right? I
The
mean, they're
point's
all
the
doing
same, is like, are we making sure we're making the necessary investment relative to our peers, and is it working?
Right, for sure.
And certification is nice, but I'd be more interested in outcomes than having someone else just come certify what we're doing.
No, absolutely. I'm happy. We're wanting to get more outcomes as well, and I'm happy to get more data from the other districts. And I won't speak to it because I don't have the data. Dublin and Westerville are also doing the OMAS and CARF accreditation now as well. So it is something that other districts are looking to do. So I think that it is a direction that other districts are taking, but certainly having better outcomes is something that I want as well.
I don't know what the certification gets you. What does that demonstrate?
So the certification, so one of the things that I forgot to highlight was we were able to get funding through the Mental Health Board because of our certification. So they're giving us funding for the mental health specialists that were previously funded through Centero. So they're now, instead of funding that through Centero, they're providing those funds to us.
And we're eligible for that because of the accreditation?
Correct. They would not provide us those funds without the accreditation. Correct. And so that's one piece that opens up other funding opportunities, other grants through the state and things like that. It also ensures that the services that we are providing are being provided by certified people. We are providing the services that we are allowed to be providing. Again, we're providing services that are effective and making sure we're providing those outcomes data. So it's similar to how ODU oversees the schools to make sure that we're doing things the way that we're supposed to be doing as a school. The mental health services that we're providing, OMAS is making sure that we're providing them the way that any other mental health agency would have to provide mental health services. So it gives us that, making sure that we're following the law as well.
So part of the staffing, though, if I'm understanding this correctly, part of it's contractual, because you said contractually you had to add somebody at Orange. So we have, like, I'm guessing it's based on students that triggers the number of...
The school counselors, yes.
Is that the only one that's contractual?
Correct. The school counselors are contractual, and the school nurses, although it's not ratio, it's just number.
Okay.
So
So it sounds like what we need to fine tune is really the big picture program evaluation.
Yeah.
Are we getting what we think we're getting, and how do we measure that? Right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be important to pull back and be able to track the same data points over several years, and also make sure that outcomes don't necessarily mean like improvements in someone's mental health, because it's so individual, and as much intervention as you give someone, that doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't going to backslide or that things aren't going to happen to them. So just being very mindful about what data points we're tracking and how we do that and how we even ask the questions, whether it's a survey, whether it's, diagnoses or number of sessions or those sorts of things, to make it sort of as objective as possible, and understanding that when you're dealing with something like mental health, that it's not linear, and just because someone sees a counselor 5 or 6 times doesn't necessarily mean that things are gonna, go in the diagonal exactly one-to-one. So it is hard to put a dollar sign, a value number on things like this, but I think it would be good to talk to other schools who are doing this and other mental health providers and see what sort of data, and maybe even the state, I don't know if they keep track. I started doing some data tracking for our drug courts and mental health courts when I was at the state Supreme Court, and we spent, I think, almost a year even developing the questions with our PhD statisticians on how do we ask this question, where do we put it in the survey, so that we're not, affecting the outcome of how people are answering this question. So
Absolutely.
I know that is part of the certification. That's what OMOS requires, but ongoing evaluation of what is in those surveys and how we ask the questions.
I think it would be helpful, I think following up on Mr. O'Brien's question, as I'm just thinking about sort of how we map it out, right, as trying to think about it appropriately, it would be helpful to know sort of what our FTE looks like for, like, as we're thinking about all of the people that are involved in mental health, because it's not even just all the people you listed, right? All of the teachers are involved in tier
absolutely.
one stuff, right? So it would be helpful, I think, to have a sense of where we are in terms of a total head count, of pure FTE, right? Like each school social work or each SRO is not going to be 1.0 in mental health services, right? They're going to be probably less than 0.1 would be my guess, maybe, who knows? But it would be helpful to have a sense of what that true FTE looks like, and then sort of how that maps against our peers, at least on a per student basis. And I don't know if it's even measurable, but I think that would be an important data point as we think about it. I know that you've presented in prior meetings about sort of what the field says the ideal numbers are, and it's like we're way below whatever the field says the number of social workers per whatever is. But I would be curious about what our comparators are actually looking like as opposed to what sort of the aspirational goal in the field is. I think that would be helpful as we think through that.
So benchmarking where we're at, and I'm always thinking the contract, because some of it, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but some of it can be discretionary, like we can say we have a greater need, but it might exceed what we're required to do by the collective bargaining.
Right.
So that's a good question. I would be interested in that. And then we talked about this very early on when the committee started meeting about that continuous evaluation of, is this getting us what we were looking to get?
Right.
So I don't think that's a one-time deal. I think that's like a continuous effort.
Right. For sure. Great. Great. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Meyer.
All right, thank you. And I really do appreciate your engagement and the questions, because absolutely right. I think that alleviating barriers to learning is extremely important. Mr. DiTilio and Ms. Fury talked a lot about learning, but as an organization, we have to be able to alleviate barriers to learning, but we have to also understand as an organization how we're being effective and how we're going to measure those things. So appreciate your questions and engagement. So with that, the beginning of the school year, and Mr. Lester mentioned, there are some pictures from the grand opening of our 17th elementary, Peachblow Crossing Elementary School, on Sunday, August 11th. So we had about 800 families attend the grand opening. Also, we were joined by our wonderful board members, state, county, and township officials, and our special guest, Ohio School Boards Association President Sally Green, was also in attendance. So just a really, again, great day. The weather was perfect, great turnout, and then Principal Gryjak and her staff have done an amazing job preparing that building to welcome students the first day of school, which I was there on the first day as well. Also, Mr. Lester mentioned convocation. It's just a great time for us to bring our over 3,000 employees to, this year was at Berlin High School, so 3 sessions at Berlin High School. So obviously you can see pictures there. And again, I want to shout out to Above the Noise, the a cappella group from Orange High School. Amazing. And I said this at convocation, but I hired Miss Brooks when I opened Orange in 2008 as the principal, and a couple years later she came to me asking about introducing or creating an a cappella group in the choir program. So so happy that we did, because just some amazing talent that she's had over the years. And obviously, again, any way that we can showcase that talent, here was certainly an opportunity at Convocation. And again, we had a guest speaker, so Kate Francis. Her message was received very, very well. The funny thing about stress, and again, finding our purpose and strategies on how we can deal with stress, both professionally and personally, in our lives. Want to also highlight, this is a big part of Convocation too, our partner expo. So we had 90 local businesses and organizations, 11 Bridge Ed partners, 10 district departments, and then our 4 high school DECA programs. And I think somebody told me Olentangy High School, what they net, $24,000 in sales of apparel that day. And I'm sure the other 4 high schools did as well too, but that's a good morning. $24,000. So I wanted to highlight that as well. Also want to, again, congratulate our District Certified Teacher of the Year, Mary Bischoff, literacy specialist at Olentangy Liberty Middle School, and our Classified Staff Member of the Year, Bill Angle, custodian at Olentangy Hyatt's Middle School. And we have members of our teaching staff and our classified staff that are nominated through a nomination process, and eventually we select who the Teacher of the Year and the Classified Staff Member of the Year. But I do want to highlight just the tremendous amount of work that goes on across this great district. Again, 27 buildings, 3,000 staff members, 24,000 students, just a lot of great people in the organization that work tirelessly across this district throughout the year and, of course, over the summer to get the school year ready. So I want to recognize obviously these 2 individuals as well as our entire staff. So the beginning of the year, you guys know I love the beginning of the year, so district leadership team and central office administrators, we've been out in buildings for the first week of school. So I'm almost done with my building visits from the first week, so I have a few more schools, but just want to highlight just again, a great start to the school year, and that doesn't happen by accident. We just have tremendous people in the organization who care deeply about our students and our families across the organization. So from our school kitchens to our intervention aides to our clinic aides to our teachers to our bus drivers, custodians, everyone in the organization just they do a really good job of welcoming back our students during the school year. Just a couple things I want to point out from my time in the schools, and I love going in all the schools, but I really love see that first one there in the kindergarten class for the Play-Doh. We were actually making a coyote. We were at Peachblow Crossing, so we were making a coyote out of the Play-Doh. But some interesting things. So we were at Berlin High School and we went into a senior art class. So sat down and I was participating in the activity. So this is a class of seniors in art class. So they were impressed that actually I'm a normal person, and a quote was, "You're real?" Yes, I'm real. So that was funny.
They only know you through Instagram, so.
Yeah, exactly. So we were at Berkshire Middle School and a brand new teacher, and I've noticed we've hired, and we talk about pipeline, but we've hired a lot of Olentangy grads, and it's really noticeable this year from all 4 of our high schools who were inspired to go in education, went in education, and they're coming home. But this is in particular, so Berkshire Middle School 6th grade ELA teacher. I asked her the question about why teaching, why English language arts. So she went back and talked about her 5th grade teacher who had inspired her in the experience that she had in her 5th grade teacher's classroom at Indian Springs. And it just so happens that 5th grade teacher is now at Berkshire Middle School and they're neighbors. But what was really impressive is she pulled out her 5th grade notebook off her shelf behind her desk from her ELA notebook, or 5th grade notebook from Indian Springs, and had it all tabbed in everything. And she was, just glowing, just talking about that experience and obviously her inspiration to become a teacher. So I want to highlight that. Also want to highlight this is another, the kindergartners and first graders are so curious, and they say the funniest things. So we're at Walnut Creek, and the kindergarten said, well, I'm Mr. Meyer, the superintendent. Why'd they name you after a or grocery store? That was the first thing. So anyways, we're having a lot of fun out in the buildings. So just wanted to mention a few of those things. Okay, so superintendent action items. We have 4 retirements you can see up there. So over 70 years of collective service to Olentangy schools from our 4 retirees. So Joyce Dursum, 13 years, Tammy Riley, who is Mr. Jenkins' administrative assistant, 24 years, and Mary Turon, who was our intervention aide and vice president for our Intervention and Clinic Aides Association. So I know that Sue's here, and you told her she couldn't, but
I told her to wait for me, and
yeah.
she wasn't waiting, so I might have to go next year myself.
Yeah. So we for sure want to thank them for their years of service to Olentangy students, to the families, to the staff. But want to highlight Randy Wright, a member of our district leadership team, has submitted his retirement for December 27th of 2024. Randy came to the district, 25 years of service in the district, so teacher, coach, dean of students, assistant principal, chief of administrative services is this year 10, 9 or 10? Year 10, yeah. Year 10 and part of our district leadership team. But just for me personally, when I first came to the district in 2007, we hired our principals a year early. So I was housed at Olentangy High School, and it was a great move by the district because I think we had about 500 students from Olentangy going to Orange. So it was an opportunity for me to be in the building, to meet students. But, one of the very first people in the organization to welcome me to the district was Mr. Wright. And I said this at our all-administrator meeting. I don't know if he was really happy to do that because then I landed in his office almost daily. But he was really good, took me under his wing, and coming new into the organization, you have a lot of questions. So he was very patient with me answering all of those questions, so I really appreciate that. And then as principal at Orange High School, Mr. Wright was the principal at Liberty High School. So again, in this district, we just have such great people in the district. So the collaboration that happens within a school and across the organization and how we make big feel small is extremely impressive. So as a colleague, as high school principals, we talked many times during the week and appreciate the many conversations that I had with Mr. Wright because I learned a lot from Mr. Wright and we learned a lot from each other. So appreciate that and always took time to take my calls. And in high school principal, you don't have much time to do anything, but we connected quite a few times during the week. So appreciate that. And then, of course, the last 10 years on the district leadership team, I think that when we came over in 2015 initially, when Mr. Rafe hired us, it was just, it was, to me, it was a seamless transition because of the working relationship that we had. And then working with Mr. Wright, again, a lot closer on the same team as a district leader, just the loyalty that he has to the organization, to the community, and the level of work that he does in the organization. Everything about Olentangy, he's everything about Olentangy. So we're definitely going to miss him. We want to wish him the best. I also want to introduce his lovely wife sitting next to him, Nikki. I asked her, I said, hey, you ready for retirement? She was like, I don't know. And again, it's well-deserved, and for sure want to thank Mr. Wright for his years of service to Olentangy, to many, many students, many staff members, and many families over the years. So thank you, and we want to wish you the best in retirement. All right, important dates coming up. So last night we had high school curriculum night. So I talked to 2 high school principals and at least 1 board member who was at one of the high schools. So I got good feedback from the. That was you.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I can't believe what these kids learn.
Yep. So that was last night, and then we have elementary K2 curriculum night tonight, and Dr. Wallach, sorry.
okay.
She's
my third second grader.
she's fulfilling her duty tonight.
Yep.
And then middle school curriculum night, Wednesday, August 28th, elementary grades 3 through 5, Thursday, August 29th, Labor Day. So we get into a holiday there with no school, and then our first professional development day of the year, September 16th. And again, kudos to our curriculum, Mr. DiTilio and Ms. Fury. Thanks for that presentation on professional development. And I echo the same thing that Ms. Fury said. When I came into the district in 2007, was blown away. I was in 4 other districts prior to coming to Olentangy, and just so impressed with how intentional and laser focused we are as a district around professional development and adult learning. And I've said this before, if you show me a school where adults are learning, for sure that'll be a school where students are learning. So we do it across the district. But I noticed that right off the bat, and extremely proud of the professional development opportunities that we provide for our staff. So our first day is Monday, September 16th, and then our next board meeting is Thursday, September 12th, right here at 6:30.
Well, I want to just echo Mr. Meyer and speak about Mr. Wright. You know, what most of us up here came to the board relatively recently, right? And Mr. Bryant a little bit longer before that. But certainly none of us were here 25 years ago, right? I had slightly more hair 25 years ago. Not a lot more hair, but still slightly. But what has impressed me about this organization as we've come into it is the culture, right? Is the culture that has been built up. That doesn't happen in a year. It doesn't happen in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. It takes the work of a lot of people over a whole long period of time, and people that are committed to both the values of the organization and of just doing the right thing. So I appreciate the work over 25 years. That's a long time of really trying to build this place up the right way. There are going to be challenges, there are going to be pitfalls and setbacks and all sorts of things. But when someone is truly passionate about making a place the right place to be, it makes it a little bit easier to do. So hopefully it was a little bit easier for you over those 25 years because of the passion of trying to do the right thing. And I think the efforts of you and so many other people over the years to build up that culture are really reflected in what is Olentangy today. And so I think we all owe sort of a debt of gratitude to everyone that has contributed, but certainly when we look at someone who has made this their life's work, I just want to echo the thanks and really recognize them. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, so for Mr. Wright, we've worked together for quite a while. I think the highest compliment you can tell someone when they're retiring is you're leaving this place better than when you found it, and you're going to leave a legacy of that for the staff, the administration, and the students, and that's something you should be very proud of. So thank you.
Have you tapped anyone to carry the torch of your happy emails?
There's a lot of torches. People are going to grab them.
I saw people outside.
For different reasons.
Yeah.
For different reasons, yeah. There's a few torches nobody wants.
Yeah.
That's going to be
Mr. Wright, how many schools were here when you started? How many kids?
we had 5,600 kids. There was 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 4 elementaries.
Thank you.
Scioto Ridge had just opened, so that was.
I would have liked to see you coach. That would be interesting.
Nah, it's not for the faint of heart. I got a lot of coaches and players that were thankful I moved into administration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jenkins.
Ryan. I forgot. I told. Okay.
Easy.
My fault. I distracted
Planned
him.
that. Don't worry about it, we planned it.
Good evening, everyone. I have a very brief treasurer's report this evening. It's only the action items that will be presented to you as a consent agenda. The items are the approval of the August 8th minutes, the approval of the July 2024 financial report, the donations that you see, Arrowhead Elementary, PTO providing a speaker system for Arrowhead Elementary, supplemental summer camp coaches at Liberty High School. Those are rounding out. I think we have one more batch that will be on next board meeting. Some supplemental coaches at Liberty Athletic, a lot of times volunteers. We will allow our booster clubs agree to make a donation to the district, and then we choose to use to employ them. Same thing at Olentangy High School, their athletic boosters and that donation. Another group of summer camps at Olentangy High School, again through generous contributions of our booster clubs. And then finally, again, another supplemental coach. The one item I'll call your attention to, it's challenging enough to be a PTO booster club member, so we do everything we can to try to help with that lift. We have gone through the support organization manual. We've reviewed it. A lot of the changes that you see weren't terribly substantive from last year's overhaul. We just made sure, for example, things like links worked. Some added things were there. This is, I think, the least we could do as a district. There's a lot of things that our booster folks are doing, and certainly, you know, we don't want to vitiate or weaken their ability to do their jobs. So we try to create things like this that will make that a much easier lift for them. So if there's not any questions, I'll go ahead and sit down and we can proceed.
I'll just comment that the support organization manual, it sounds like a minor thing, but it's really important. In my mind, it's risk mitigation, right? Trying to give the boosters and the PTOs as much support as we can, to your point, without overstepping our bounds. But at least the tools are there to help them be effective in their roles instead of just letting them fly blind. So
That's
I think
correct.
It's a great step forward.
Everything about it is to ameliorate or get rid of all of their hard work being rendered ineffective by a procedural error, a monetary error, you know, an error of process. You know, there's a lot of things that you can work through, but some of the things, especially with groups like the IRS or the Ohio Auditor of State, you'll pay for if you make those kinds of mistakes.
Especially with the turnover that comes with the fact that most of these
Yes.
are run by the parents who, once they're
Yes.
out of that building, they're gone. And all of a sudden, it's a whole new wave of leadership who's never had to deal with those types of record keeping and regulations and those sorts of things.
That's the biggest challenge by far. That's a great point, Ms. Schreiber, is you have a lot of well-meaning, good-hearted people who are doing this out of simply, you know, the generosity of their own time, and there's quite a bit that's there. I hate it when I have a new officer that looks at it and says, I didn't realize it was all of this, and that's why we do things like this, is to hopefully give them as much support as we possibly can.
And that reminds me of something I should have said at the outset, which is the turf field donated by the boosters at the Liberty Athletic, which looks fantastic.
It does look fantastic, and it's
really-
getting a lot of use already.
Already, it's getting a lot of
it is.
use.
Yes.
So I really want to thank them for that very generous donation, and something that's going to really, I've seen the band on it, I've seen the soccer team, I've seen all sorts of people all over.
Every
It's
night.
great. Every night, so it's great.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Right.
And I have no participation.
Okay. All right, then we will move on. Mr. Jenkins, I'm a little confused by the board action item. I'm not sure what, I think it's showing up for me there.
Yeah, there's no board action item.
Yeah, it's a template, and rather than just delete it, the template item is still there, so
Okay,
you can
so
skip
then-
down to the treasurer's
Okay,
consent.
good. So,
Yeah.
all right, we're moving on to the treasurer consent action items then. Mr. Jenkins, would you go ahead and present those?
Yes, as noted in the presentation, tonight's treasurer action items are being considered as a one consent calendar. Item A would be the approval of the August 8th minutes. Item B
approval of the July 2024 financial report. Item C, approval of the donations that we just covered. Item D, approval of the revised support org manual. And then item E, as noted, is the one action item to approve all of those items unless you would like to pull an individual item out for deliberation and vote.
Okay, would anyone like to pull any of those out for separate deliberation? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Oh, we didn't get a motion or a second,
Oh,
did we?
Jesus. Getting ahead of myself. Gosh, I'll tell you what. Can I have a motion to approve these as one consent action?
So moved, Mr. Lester.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, now hearing none.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
And I'll abstain as a member of the Arrowhead PTO. I don't want to cause any issue with their donation, so I'll just abstain from the vote since we've got plenty.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Meyer, do you want to move to the superintendent consent action items? I'll note that we have one that we have pulled out separately that I'll step out of the room for, but the other ones. yeah.
Mr. Lester, thank you. Board members, I recommend approval of the following superintendent consent action items A through F. Specific human resource items administrative, specific human resource items certified, C, specific human resource items classified, D, specific human resource items supplemental, E, approval of seniors for early graduation, and F, approval of business management and facilities items. I'm asking you to approve these items by one single action and vote unless you'd like to discuss any of these items separately.
And just to be clear, the business management item is just the impractical transportation.
Impractical transportation, yes, correct.
Would anyone like to discuss these separately? Nope. All right, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none, Mr. Jenkins.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes. All right, I will step out and let Dr. Dabrico.
Can't do worse than that.
Here we go. So we have item 13A, recommend approval of professional services agreement with Ohio State University on behalf of its Wexner Medical Center. Can I please have a motion?
I'll move.
Thank you. A second.
Do we have to have a discussion?
After the.
That's after it's moved?
Yes, ma'am.
Really go that way? Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Jenkins, call the roll, please.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
We don't have to call me, right?
Just gonna leave him out in the hallway.
Wait and see if he brings us dinner.
Bring him into adjourn.
Do you need him here for that?
Tell him it all fell apart.
Okay, I will then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, our next meeting will be in 2 weeks, and Mr. Jenkins, go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Ms. Schreiber?
Yes.
Never happened before. Got a fancy little.
All right, we are adjourned.